let's get to my Christmas wish list. And you know what? I'm just going to say right here, there's a small, small, small chance I get this, but it's infinitesimal. All right, but I'm going to say it anyway. And here is number one. I want Susie the swan to come home. Okay, so where I celebrate Christmas with my family, I have an old farmhouse in the countryside outside of New York City. I'm very blessed to have it. And it has a little pond. And I am praying that Christmas morning I wake up and I look out the window and she won't be under the tree, but I am praying that Susie the swan is back. I have to tell you who she is if you've not been with us for a while. Look, I'm a widow. I lost my husband on March 1st, 2020. Okay. And very shortly after I got this house in the countryside, which is where I go often to hear myself think, and I run there on the weekends sometimes if I'm lucky. And a few years ago, one day I was walking around the little pond right behind my house, and there was this beautiful white swan by herself. And we all know swans mate for life. And it was so peculiar that this single swan was in my pond. And I remember saying to my dogs, yes, my constant companion, my dogs, because I was by myself, I said, look, there's a beautiful swan on the pond. And of course, they answered me, no, they didn't, because dogs don't talk. Anyway, we kept on walking around, and I thought, okay, the swan is visiting and she'll be gone. But she was so beautiful, and I took a picture of her, and I made this mental note to tell my kids, wow, we have a swan on the pond. Well, the thing that happened was that the swan stayed, and she took residence up in the pond behind my house, and I became incredibly attached to her because she was clearly a member of a pair, and something happened to her partner, and of course I could very deeply relate to her. And she took to me, I think, because I would walk the dogs around the pond in the morning and she would paddle alongside us. And I named her Susie after myself. It's totally cringe. And in fact, I would often greet her by saying, good morning, Susie. And I used to do this all the time. And then one day I remembered walking around the pond with one of my kids or two of my kids who came to visit for the weekend. And I said, look, there's Susie the swan. And they were like screaming, what have you done? And I said, I've named this swan Susie. And they're like, Mom, that's so cringe. I was like, I am cringe. Okay. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says I am cringe on it. But I loved her. And obviously I was relating very deeply to her. And she stayed for a year or two. Actually, I saw her every day and I worried about her when it got cold, and we would address each other. I know, you're thinking I'm Delulu, but I loved her. And actually, one time some friends were visiting from out of town, and we were walking and she emerged. And I said, look, I have a swan on my pond. And they said, oh my God, Susie, did you place her here? And I said, no. God did. And I really do feel there was something kind of divine about this single swan appearing when I needed her. You know why? She gave me the courage to be alone. She was like this beautiful, noble, regal, brave swan who was meant to be in a couple, and she was alone. And I was that swan. I was a person who was meant to be still in my marriage with my husband, and it was not God's plan for us. And he faced it so bravely and so nobly, and he faced it better than I did, that's for sure. And I thought Susie was there for me, and I thought that she was there to remind me that this is something that people survive. And maybe I grew too attached to her. I must have, because I loved her so much. And then on July 4th of this year, there were fireworks in my town, and they went on for hours and hours and hours, and the dogs were losing their shit, and it was not pleasant. If you own a dog, you know what fireworks can be like. I wish I was the person who loved fireworks, but no, I am the grump who hates them because of dogs. I didn't think about Susie during those fireworks. I was too busy trying to peel my dog out from underneath the covers. Anyway, the next morning I went out to take the walk with the dogs, and I was halfway around the pond, and I was like, where is she? And I turned to my dogs and I said, where's Susie the swan? Once again, they did not answer, and I got a little bit frantic. And I immediately went to my computer as soon as we got home, and I went to ChatGPT, and I said, I've had a swan. I mean, I typed this in. I've had a swan who's lived in my pond for several years, and I'm quite attached to her. And last night, there were fireworks, and she disappeared. When will she come back? Isn't this sort of sad, right? I asked the machine. And the machine said, well, swans love their homes, and it actually assured me that she would come back. So that was July 4th, and it's now December 24th. And Susie is not back. I think about her more than I should because I miss the courage she gave me. Anyway, I would like to look out on Christmas morning, and I'd love to see her back on the pond like she was last Christmas. And what does this say about my values? Well, there's a value called belonging. I call this the love value. It's the value about how much you want to be in relationship. How much do you want to be in relationship with friends or a romantic partner? And I guess this missing and this attachment to her must speak to it, because I'll tell you something. Um, I ache in a way that would suggest that look, there are some things about being an independent person. I've never been a single person. It certainly gives you a lot of freedom and agency around your time and what you do with yourself. A lot of things you just don't end up doing that much in relationship. But I think that I had a stronger, higher value on belonging than I ever knew. And I think that this beautiful white swan had taught me that, because my missing of her, I think, is actually my missing of belonging. I think that's what it is. And so there's that value, which I never actually gave much credence to. And to tell you the truth, on a lot of the tests, it doesn't pop for me. But my attachment to Susie the swan suggests to me that my belonging might be a value that's a little bit stealth for me. And I don't even want to say it out loud, because it means admitting how much I miss it. Okay, so that's the number one thing I want to see. Please hope that Susie's there. Wouldn't that be a freaking miracle?